Blinded by the light. You know, in 1973, I'm just a boy back in those days, but I remember there was a famous song on the radio called Blinded by the Light. And it was originally written and performed by Bruce Springsteen, but his version didn't make for a big success, except for that he was the songwriter. And a few years later, in 1976, a British group called Manfred Mann's Earth Band did a revised cover of the song. And it became the #1 song on Billboard's Hot 100 in 1977. And the chorus of the song was, blinded by the light, revved up like a deuce, another runner in the night, blinded by the light. And the Deuce was a 1932 Ford Coupe, very popular automobile at the time that was used for racing for many, many years. Even though the production of the vehicle was 1932, it was very suitable and seemed cool for those who wanted to do drag racing on the roads. Very dangerous sport. But the song, while catchy, is not our subject today. It's about being blinded by the light of God. And in our Haftarah today, Isaiah 60, God tells us a message of hope for dark times. You know, here, God tells us something very important through the prophet Isaiah. And he says to us, arise and shine, for your light has come. The glory of Adonai has risen upon you. For behold, darkness covers the earth, and deep darkness the peoples. But Adonai will arise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. Nations will come to your light, kings to the brilliance of your rising. Arise and shine. It is during the most difficult times, I have found, during the darkest of days, when we are often struck by the blinding light of God. You know, a father once told his young son to go to bed. Time to go to sleep. The boy started up the stairs but realized it was dark and he couldn't reach the light switch. So he went back to his dad, but his father had told him, go on up, because God was there. The boy knew that this was his dad's final answer. So he started back up the stairs. But on the first step, he stopped. He looked up and he said, God, if you're there, please don't move or you'll scare me to death. I would imagine that most of us can relate to this little boy's fears. All of us at some point in our lives, have been unable to reach the light switch. All of us at some point in our lives have been trapped in the darkness of this world, looking and praying for light, but not knowing where to look. God's help is not far from us. His hand is never far from us. In fact, he is very near to those who seek him. You see, you don't have to be rich or powerful to have God come into your life with his blinding light to save you. Indeed, often when God shows up and blinds us, it's because we have been seeing the wrong way. And he is about to save us from our wrong path. And almost always, God acts greatest with the least of people. You know, in our Parsha today, it contains a command to retell a particular story, which is the shared story of God's people. You know, when you enter the land and gather your first harvest, Moses tells the people, present a basket of first fruits to the priest as an offering of the Lord, and tell a story, which begins with an unforgettable combination of 3 Hebrew words. Arami Ovid Avi. My father was a wandering Aramean. But the words here can also be translated as my father was a homeless Aramean. He was wandering for years to the place that God would show him. He was homeless. Let's take a look at the text here in Deuteronomy 26, 5 to 11. My father was a wandering Aramean, and he went down to Egypt, and he lived there as an outsider, few in number. But there he became a great nation, mighty and numerous. The Egyptians treated us badly, afflicted us, and imposed hard labor on us. Then we cried out to Adonai, God of our fathers, and Adonai listened to our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. And then Adonai brought us out from Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with great terror and with signs and with wonders. And he brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So now look, I have brought the first of the fruits of the soil that you have given me, Adonai. And then you are to set it before Adonai your God and worship before Adonai your God. And you will rejoice in all the good that Adonai your God has given to you and to your house, you, the Levite, and the outsider in your midst. What a story! What a story! A man who believed in God and followed the blinding light of God began his walk with God as a wandering or homeless Aramean. And his future descendants went to Egypt, just few of them, and there they grew into a mighty nation. And God took them out of slavery there and brought them to a land flowing with milk and honey. You know, I love the blinding light of God. Because while we are blind for a moment, or for a couple of days, or whatever the time is, that God blinds us from his brilliance, there he begins to work on us. You know, when I was not even 20 years old, I was in the military. I was stationed in Germany, and it was winter. They had about 9 or 10 months a year of winter over there where I was at. It was always snowing. And the Germans did something very interesting, which I don't think we do here. They this goes back, you know, to the late 70s, early 80s, 79, 80, 81 when I was there. And they salt the roads before it snows. So we don't do that. We wait for the snow to come, then we salt, right? They salt the road before it snows so that the streets themselves and the highways don't have snow on them. Isn't that a good idea? Anyway, I was out on a field problem, what some people used to call maneuvers, you know, war games, war practice. And somebody asked me, and I don't remember who it was a very long time ago, if I could light an immersion heater. And being the young, cocky person that I was, I said, yeah, I could handle it. I didn't even know what an immersion heater was. It turns out that an immersion heater is used in the military when they have a field mess. They have a chow hall, but it's outside, like tents with open flaps, even in the winter, and you go in there, you get your food, and after you're done with your mess kit or the trays, you're supposed to go into the soapy water first. They have a brush, a big thick brush with a handle and a rope on it. And you wash that in there, and then you go in the next one and you dunk and rinse, and then you go in the next one, burning hot water, and you rinse in there, then you put the tray down, and you go. You have to, you know, you eat, you wash your own stuff. But to heat that water, they have what's called an immersion heater. So the immersion heater has a pipe sticking up like this out of the can with a hook on the edge of the garbage can. It's metal garbage can, it's not plastic. But they have like a clamp on it. And then at the bottom of it, there's kind of a tube that goes in a circle. And that's where the fire is. On top of the smokestack, or whatever you call it, there's a small drum that holds some kind of fuel. I think it's diesel, whatever it holds. And that you adjust it, and it drips down in there. And that causes the fire to keep going. This is called an immersion heater. And so there's a way to do it safely. Now, never having done it, and it was cold, and the guys are waiting to eat, and you have to turn that on so they can wash their trays. I said, sure, I can do it. I'm not even remotely related to anything that they're doing, right? I was communication surveillance, and later I cross-trained infantry. But I never had any experience in activities of the mess hall. No experience at all. I said, yeah, I can do it. So I go over there and turn on the thing. It's flowing down there, it's flowing down there, trying to strike a match. Now it's windy, it's cold, it's winter, and snowing. I'm trying to light the match, practically done with the matchbook. I finally light a match, and it lights, and I throw it down there, and it goes right up into my face. It burned my eyebrows off. You don't want to know how weird I looked, but I wouldn't know because I couldn't see anything. I felt like I had rocks under my eyelids. It was a terrible feeling. They evacuated me to the aid station. From there, was sent to a hospital, whatever, and then they patched me up the best they could, and they sent me back to my unit, which was in the field. They couldn't send me back to the base. There was no one there to help me, so everybody was in the field, everybody. So they put me back to the field. I'm in a cot with a sleeping bag on top of it. In walks the captain, and he says to me, "How you feeling?" And I said, "I'm feeling kind of blind." I had some kind of ointment over my eyelids. They were closed. There was big like gauze or something on top of them, and then it was taped around the head. I couldn't see even if I could see, I wouldn't be able to see through that. And they said it was going to be 3 days till they could uncover, and they were going to leave the medication in and see how I was doing. They didn't see permanent damage, but they didn't know whether or not I would be able to see again. So the captain walked in. I don't know, gee, what does he want from me, right? He's going to burn me for trying to light the immersion heater without training. But he didn't. He walked in and he said, "How you feeling?" And I told him, except for my eyes, I'm doing fine. And he said, "What would you be doing right now in your rack?" They call it a rack, in your rack, if you could see. I said, "Probably reading." And so he looked around the room where there were multiple, cots and sleeping bags, but everybody else was out training. And he was a signal commander. He was a captain in the signal corps, and one of the commanding officers in my unit. Not the commanding officers, but one of them for signal. And so he walked around, and I guess he found a comic book, and he started reading Spider-Man to me. I guess that was his good deed for the day. So 3 days later, they take me back to what they call the aid station. It's like a mobile field hospital. They take me there, the doctors sit me up, they take the bandages off my eyes, and I begin to see some light, and then they put some stuff in my eyes, and they check and whatnot. And it took a couple of hours to go through various testings and whatever, but I walked out of there. It was a little blurry at first, and they had to send somebody with me, but I walked back to my unit, wasn't carried. And after a few hours later than that, I could see. But for 3 days, I couldn't see anything but darkness. I was blinded. I made a stupid mistake, and I was blinded. And then 3 days later, I had my vision back. When I think about being blinded by the light of God, and I was blinded by a fire and it blew up in my face, but I think about the blinding light of God, and I love God's blinding light. In the creation story in Genesis, he said, "Let there be light." And there was. And when Moses was on the mountain with God, Adonai's radiance shone upon him so strongly that the people could not look at him, because he was shining with the brilliance, with the radiance of God. They were blinded by his sight. As I mentioned earlier from our Haftarah portion today in Isaiah 60, it says, "Arise and shine, for your light has come. The glory of Adonai has risen over you." And in the New Covenant, you're all familiar with the good news of John chapter 1. And here the Messiah is called the light of the world. And later, Yeshua goes up on top of a mountain, taking with him Peter, Jacob, and John. And it says he was transformed, and his form was like a blinding white light. And then we come to Acts 9, where Paul is at that time on a mission to arrest and have executed all followers of the way. All followers of Haftarah, the way. Those who believed in Yeshua. And he's traveling on the road to Damascus. And a blinding light from heaven knocks him to the ground. And Paul then has an encounter with Yeshua. But then he realized that he was blinded. Do you see what I'm talking about? About God getting involved. You have an encounter with God. You're going on a certain path, on a certain way, and he stops you, and his brilliance blinds you. Because we were seeing wrong. Takes away that vision, gives us new vision. And Paul was blinded by the light of God for 3 days until the scales fell from his eyes. He was blinded by the light of Messiah. And actually, this is the hope, the light that God refers to in Isaiah 60, where he says, "Arise and shine, for your light has come. The glory of Adonai has risen over you." He's talking about the coming Messiah. Let me share with you a story about how our values are developed, how God guides us. And before I get to that, I have one more example from the New Covenant to share, which I almost forgot here. It comes from Revelation 21, beginning in verse 22. And it's also about the light, the blinding light of God. It says, "I saw no temple in the city." This is about the New Jerusalem from heaven. "I saw no temple in the city, for Adonai, God of heaven's armies, is its temple, as is the Lamb. And the city has no need for the sun or the moon to shine on it, because God's Shekinah gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb. And the nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it." What a beautiful vision. You know, God molds us into his image more and more every day as he works upon us. And how we shine is because our light has come and the glory of Adonai is indeed upon us. Remember what the Torah says in Deuteronomy 26, "My father was a wandering Aramean." This wonderful, very short little story tells about honoring parents that reflects how God's light is in each of us, if only we would allow his light to be seen in us. If only we would allow it. We're so experienced on shielding that light, on guarding it, on donning an armor that protects us from sharing that we are believers, that God's light is within us, that Messiah lives in us. We don't want anyone to know. Shh, it's a secret. The story is told about a boy named Kenny, kind of a rebellious teen. "Kenny, can you please turn down the radio so I can tell you something before we leave?" the boy's mother shouted over the music blasting from the portable stereo speakers. He flashed his parents an annoyed look, and with a snarl, slightly lowered the volume. "Yeah, what do you want? Mike?" Another Mike. "Mike here will be watching you while we're out," she said, pointing to the tall babysitter who had just walked in the door. "Please listen to what he says, and please change out of those dirty clothes and brush your..." But before his mother was finished speaking, he said, "Yeah, right," flipping the volume back up before his mom had even finished speaking. Exasperated, Kenny's parents thanked Mike over the racket and went out. "Kenny, you know," Mike shook his head at the boy lounging feet up on the couch, "if I ever spoke to my mom or dad the way you just did, I wouldn't be able to sit for a week." "That's too bad for you," the boy laughed and went back to his music. Time passed. Mike, who'd been doing his homework, went to check on Kenny, now in his room, who was still glued to the radio. Don't you ever do anything else around here, like help your parents, Mike joked. Why should I? Kenny shrugged. Besides, hey, wait, he said, suddenly focusing on the radio, and the announcer just said that today is Super Prize Day, big giveaways to listeners. He turned up the volume even higher. Just then the phone rang and Mike went to answer it. A minute later, he burst back into the room looking all excited. Guess what, man? He said, and Kenny looked up as Mike went on. I just got off the phone and you won the Super Prize! Kenny shot straight up. Are you serious? He asked wide-eyed. Totally. They're going to pay all your expenses for you for the next 15 years. Not only that, but they're giving you a free place to live. All right! Kenny jumped up and down, fist in the air. But where? I mean, how do you get my prize? And that's the best part, man. The people giving you the prize are on their way here now. Shouldn't be more than another 5 or 10 minutes. Wow, Kenny thought, to win such a prize. Who could believe it? But he had to hurry. This was a big event, and he wanted to make a good impression on the ones giving him his super prize. It was at least he could do. Kenny quickly changed out of his grubby clothes, brushed his teeth, combed his hair. He raced downstairs just in time to hear someone turning the doorknob at the front door. I looked, Mike winked. It's them, the ones giving the super prize. Hey, you look pretty good, he added with a thumbs up. Kenny smiled from ear to ear and stood like a soldier at attention as the door swung open, and in walked his parents. The boy glared at the babysitter, who with a grin whispered back, here they are, the folks who will give you everything, a place to live, food, clothes. Think about it, man. In that moment, everything clicked in Kenny's head. Mike was right. His parents not only gave him everything, but had been doing it since he was born. Well, well, Kenny's father said, taking in the scene. Sure looks like everything's under control here. Thanks for changing your clothes, Kenny, his mother added with a smile. No problem, Mom, the boy answered, trying to sound polite. If only she knew exactly how much he'd really changed inside. Finally, God's light was starting to shine through him. So arise and shine, because your light has come, and the glory of Adonai is upon you. The 10 days of repentance from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur are almost here. Rosh Hashanah begins at sunset on Friday, September 18th, less than 2 weeks from now. Now, I find it fascinating that in the opening passage of this week's Parsha concludes with these words. That day, this day, Adonai, your God, is commanding you to these statutes and ordinances, so you are to take care to do them with all your heart and with all your soul. That's Deuteronomy 26, verse 16. Now, the phrase, with all your heart and with all your soul, b'chol labavka uv'chol nafsheka, recurs 7 times throughout Deuteronomy, most famously in the Shema in Deuteronomy 6, verse 5. But 3 additional times the phrase appears in the plural rather than the singular form. And this 7 plus 3, or 10-fold recurrence, is no accident from God. Rather, it emphasizes the core message of Deuteronomy, which is a core message of these final days of preparation before the days of awe from Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur. You see, sometimes we are so set in our ways that it is not until we are blinded by the light of God that we stop and turn back to the Lord. We might think of the heart as one aspect of the personality in contrast with others. For example, sometimes we speak of heart versus the head, the emotional side of ourselves versus the rational side, or it might be more up to date to speak of the left brain versus the right brain. In the scriptures, however, heart signifies the whole person, the real you, the real me, the heart. Ever hear the phrase, the heart of the matter? To make this meaning clear, Deuteronomy links heart with the soul 10 times, demanding that we serve God. The Shema makes it even clearer. Love Adonai your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your resources. These are not 3 compartments of the human psyche, but a 3-fold way of describing the whole person, from our core inner being to our outer being. The modern notion of heart as the emotional self in contrast with the rational self, or the private person in contrast with the public person, does great damage to you. It can lead us to think that our outward behavior does not matter so much as long as we really love God and believe in Him in some deeply inward way. We let ourselves off the hook of accountability and integrity, or we let others off the hook, failing to maintain the clear standards that apply to followers of Yeshua because, his heart was in the right place. But in Torah, heart is always linked with action. As in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 29, or in, verse 26, or in Christian Bibles in verse 29, it says, "Oh, that they had such a heart in them that they would fear me and always keep my commandments, that it might be well with them and with their children forever." So when we talk about God being concerned with the state of our hearts, we do not mean that He wants to go on a sentimental journey with us, or that He's happy as long as we have the right feelings inside. Faith alone does not work. Faith plus action is what works. You see, God here is after the whole person, a response that begins at the core and shows up outwardly in our actions, as Jacob says, "You show me your faith and I'll show you my faith by my deeds." He says, faith without deeds is dead. During this season of spiritual preparation, which is a season of preparing our hearts, perhaps we need to be a little tougher on ourselves. Yes, we have the assurance of forgiveness and restoration through the Messiah Yeshua. The blood of Messiah cleanses us from all sin. But this same Messiah says these things. Matthew 7, verse 16. "You shall know them by their fruits." And in John 14, verse 15. "If you love me, keep my commandments." Are Yeshua's commandments different than God's commandments? Well, if you actually take another look at John chapter 1, you'll find out that it was Yeshua who gave all the commandments. From the beginning of Genesis through the end of Revelation, any commandment ever given was given through Him. He made everything. Everything that came into being was from Him. Oh, no, that was the Father that was speaking to Moses. It was? Is that why Moses disintegrated? No. He didn't disintegrate. It had to be Yeshua. Yeshua is the Word of God. So, when I think about the Messiah's words, "You shall know them by their fruits, and if you love me, keep my commandments," to me it doesn't sound so different from, that they had such a heart in them that they would fear me and always keep my commandments. Do you see the symmetry here? Do you see God's reflection throughout the Scriptures? Yeshua is the one who restores our soul and heals our broken hearts, but we can search our deeds. We can make confession as we are taught to do in Scripture. We can straighten out our misdeeds with others and seek reconciliation with them. Now is the time to think about these things. If there's someone I hurt, is there someone that I offended? Is there someone that has a problem with me who is either too shy or doesn't know the way to take the first step to make things right between us? Here is what the New Covenant says about these matters. As far as it is possible for you, be at peace with all men. So you've got to make peace. At least we have to try. Now, if they say, "I don't want to talk to you," click, and they hang up. Or you see them on the street and they say, "Talk to the hand," and they walk away. You tried, but you have to try. If they don't respond, that's on them. But we have to try to make peace. Remember, Yeshua has given us the ministry of reconciliation. All this is part of preparing our hearts to meet God, to be blinded by His light. Yeshua Himself puts it this way. "Therefore, if you are presenting your offering upon the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your offering." Matthew 5, verse 23 to 24. Jewish tradition likewise emphasizes that we must make our relationship with others right before we benefit fully from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. In fact, Judaism teaches that Yom Kippur cleanses sin between man and God, but sin between man and man was healed between man and man. So if you did wrong to your friend, your roommate was there and you really needed some money and you saw that he left $100 on the table and you took it and put it in your pocket, then you must tell him what you did and you must give it back to him, and if he and with interest if he claims it. You must make things right as far as is possible for you to do so. Let me suggest a simple practice for the coming weeks. Take time each day, perhaps during your regular time of prayer. If you don't have one, make one. Review your deeds over the past year or so. Write down your misdeeds, particularly against others, and what you need to do to make things right, including specific plans to speak to some people that you have offended. I'm going to call Bob tomorrow morning. I'm going to write a letter to John. I'm going to go see my old friend that we haven't talked in 3 years. And I'm going to talk to him, whatever, try to set things right. Follow through, if all possible, before Yom Kippur. And this week's Parsha sets a high standard, indeed, but it promises an even loftier reward. In Deuteronomy 26, verse 17 through 19, it says, "Today you have affirmed Adonai as your God." That's an agreement, a contract, that you will walk in his ways, keep his statutes, his commands, his ordinances, and listen to his voice. Now today, Adonai has affirmed you as his treasured people, and he promised you that you are to keep, as he promised you that you are to keep all his commands, that he will set you high above all the nations he has made for praise, fame, and honor, and that you are to be a holy people for Adonai your God as he promised. And as we consider the message and teaching today, let us prepare for the season of return, as in the story of Kenny, who learned to appreciate his parents and all they do for him. Let us appreciate our Father in heaven. He is our Father, and we are his children. Let us approach the high holidays of God with repentant hearts. For all of us needing help, God says, and everybody needs help in one way or another, whether we're willing to admit it publicly or not. We all need help. When we need help, God says in Isaiah 41, verse 13, Isaiah 41:13, he says, "For I, Adonai your God, say to you, as I hold your right hand, have no fear, for I will help you." Yeshua is the light of the world, and all of us who believe in him have been blinded by his light, so that we can see ourselves as he sees us. Not the bad track record in back of us, but our possibilities of taking his hand, receiving his help, and walking with him. So arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen over you. Shabbat Shalom.